Hi, this is Blockchain Bad. Welcome to another episode of the Sui Move Smart Contact Development Series. Today, I'm going to be talking about transfer module. Okay, so um, when writing smart contracts, I've come across a lot of times using transfer. You see, using transfer, public transfer, share objects. So now, I want to explain what all that means. So first of all, let me show you what I was talking about. Most times you see when write smart contract, you see us using stuff like transfer, those like transfer, share objects, serialism, transfer, transfer, serialism, transfer, public transfer. So I want to explain what all that means. So first of all, let me create let me write a new object type. So let me say public stocks. Let me call it my object. Let me give it first of all, let me give it key ability. So it has to have an ID, going to be of type the ID. Let me give it a second field. Let me just call it value. And it's going to be of type U64. Okay. So after that, let me write a new function called create object. And we're going to pass in the transaction context. We have to cache transaction context. So we also should write public font. Then we have to grab the transaction context. And this function is going to return my object. So to create an object, let me first of all assign it to a variable. So my objects, then our ID going to be objects new. There is personal actual context. For now, let's leave our value to be zero. Then let's return our objects. Okay. So now again, let me write a function. Let me call it transfer. Let me just call it transfer objects. Then um okay, now sorry, let's add fun here. Now let me create a new object with this function. So let's say create object. Then right here we have to pass in our transfer context again. We have to cache it. So it's going to be of type and this context. So now we have to assign we're returning an object, so we have to assign it to a variable. Let me catch ob let's objects is equal to this. So now, every object you create, has to be owned. It's either going to be shared, the shared object, or it's going to be owned by an address. So it has to be an owned object. So first of all, to transfer this object to the user, you have to use transfer. So there's a module called transfer of Sui, but it's imported by default. So it is imported by default, so we don't need to import it again. If you see, that's one module. This alliance is provided by default, so we don't need it. So now, the function we need to transfer to an object is the transfer. So from transfer, we're going to get okay, transfer. So from the transfer, we're going to get the transfer function. So first of all, what are we transferring? We're transferring our object, then the recipient is going to be ctx dot send that. Now this for transferring an object to user. So now let's say, okay, let me just call this transfer object. to user. Let me get another function again. Let me just copy and paste this code here. Also, let me rename um just like transfer object to public. Let me just put it like this. So this time, if I want to make the object a shared object that anybody can access the object, and just like not an old object, a shared object. Um, let me use public share object to make sure it's a share object to what am I sharing this object. Now these are the first two we have. We have other function. I'm going to talk about them. So now these are the first two we have. This transfers to an address, and also this transfer to it must not necessarily be we passing. We can also like passing an address like transfer the object to. But I'm just using um let me do it like this. So you have type address. Now here also let me transfer this rather than to the sender. Let me just transfer it to an address. So aside for transfer and share objects, we have another function again called freeze object. So let me copy this again and let me call this freeze object. So now this freeze object is used to freeze an object just like the name still says. So you can get it from here also freeze object. So now this is used to freeze objects. So when an object is frozen, it's now immutable. Right here, this object is created. Now this object we created, we can actually change the value of it. Like we can come here and change we can write a function to change the value of this object and no, but for a freeze object, we can't change the value. Okay, let me give you an example of what I'm saying. Let me write another function called change value. Now it takes in an argument of object and changing. It's going to be of type. Let meet my objects. Then the new value we're changing to. And I could say value going to be of type U64. Now let me change we're going to change the value of our object. So you can say object dot value is equal to object dot value. Sorry, all your values need to be equal to value. We are going to change um value of our objects. Now this is now let me deploy this smart contact and show you what I'm talking about. So now let me click on publish to publish smart contacts. Okay, so we successfully published my contacts. So let me head over here to this Sui Move owner. First of all, let me call this flex function which is transfer to user. So this function creates a new object and transfers it to an address. So let me call transfer to user, and when I transfer it to let me transfer it to myself. Let me copy my address and transfer the object to myself. Let me execute this. So now look at it. These are created objects. I can copy this now. So right now, I can choose to change the object. If I copy this now, I'll go to Sui Vision. Let me go to scan and let's switch to DevNet. I think you're on DevNet or VS Code. Yeah, you're on DevNet. let me paste our object ID here and come to fields. You see that our value is zero. Now let me change the value of our object. So let me come here and so change value our object. Let me paste in our object here. Now let me change the value to like 120 and let me execute it again. So if I come back here and refresh, you notice that our value has changed to 120. Also, let me create another object that I need to share. So let me go and take a function transfer to public. So now this function creates a new object and transfers it's like property. It's publicly owned. It's not owned by any address. So let me execute it. Let me copy the object ID again. Let's go back to Sui mission versus scan. If I come back to fields, you see zero. Let me change the value. Let me change like 200. So if I come back here and fresh, you see our value has changed to 200. Now let me call the last function, which is freeze objects. Just like I told you, if I call this function, any object I create here and transfer and freeze the object is going to be immutable. So I can't be able to change any value in the object. So let's test it out. Let's call this one freeze object. Yeah. So let's create a new object and freeze it. So let me execute it. So let me copy the object ID over to Sui. Now this is the objects. Now look at this, the value is zero. Now let me try to change the value. Let me come here and call this change value function. Let me paste my object here and let's say I want to change like 280. This direction will actually fail. Yeah, I told you direction will fail. Why? Because it is a freeze object. So now, once this object is created, you cannot mutate this object. It is there on the blockchain forever. Unlike other objects here, where we shared, transferred, the values can be changed. But for this particular object, it is freeze forever in the blockchain. So let me close our terminal. So apart from all this, you must have come across public transfer. So we have transfer, we have public transfer, and most times it's challenging to know the difference when starting out or move. So let me explain the difference for you now. If you look at it now, if I come here for apart of transfer, you see public transfer, and it will do the same thing this transfer is doing. So if I just move it here and change this to address, now it would fill. Why? It's telling us that our object does not have the store ability. So if I won't come here again and do the same thing, I change all this to public transfer. If you look at it here now, our object had will be key ability, don't have the store ability. So if I come and change all this to public, like share object, solid transfer object, public freeze object, it's actually tell me it's an error. Because why? Okay, I have to come back here and add store ability. If I add the store ability, it's going to run away. Now, let me leave the key ability and let me explain something to you. Now, this this transfer without public was made to share object or transfer objects within a particular module. So now, if I come up here now, let's say I come here, I create a another file. Let me call it tf2.move and let me call it module tf. Let me call it tf2. Now, let me try to just copy. Let me copy all this again. Let me just copy all these codes. Except from the create objects. Let me copy the rest of the codes here. And come here. And let me try to import that module here. So I will say use tf and tf. Now for here again, this create object function is going to come from tf. So let me just do this. Going to come from a tf module, and this also going to be coming from the tf module. And also this objects here, this my object name also is going to be coming from the tf module. So let me import the tf module itself and call it self. Then let me import this our objects name. Now if I do this, I get an error. Why? You look at it now. They'll say invalid private transfer. The function Sui transfer is instead to being called in the object modules. Now, what is happening is because we cannot use transfer because we're not in the module where we created our object. So now to do something like this now, we have to use public transfer because this this object here called my object is coming from another module. So now, since we're creating the object in another module, if you want to interact with that object, or let's say you want to transfer it, like here now we created the object here, I want to transfer it to another module, we have to use public transfer rather than cannot transfer. So if I come here and I have to change it to public transfer, public share object. The reason I'm using public now is because I'm not interacting with it in that same module it was created. But if you look at it again, we still have another error. What does it say? It must have the store ability. So now, anytime you're going to interact with an object outside its module, like since this object now we're interacting with it outside the module created it, we always have to give that object store ability. So one of our scare videos, I talked about abilities on Sui. Now, if I come here now, look at it now, this error is gone. So we gave it a store ability because we always want to interact with this object outside its module. So that's why we give it the store ability. But just say we don't want to interact. We always want to interact with this object in this module. We have to now need to know the store the store key of the store ability. So now I come here, it'll be an error because we don't want to interact with that object outside this module. But if I want to interact with it, I have to come back here and put the store ability. And if you look at it now, even when I put the star ability here, this transfer still works. So it's something that is very confusing. But just know that anytime you're going to like interact with an object in the same module, just use transfer. But if you're interacting, like if you're transferring the object outside that module that's created, you have to use public transfer. So that's the difference between transfer, like normal transfer, normal public objects, normal share object, and normal public share objects. Now, let me explain a lot to you again. If you remember, in our last smart contract that we deployed here, we only had the key ability. Now, anytime your objects have this key ability, you cannot transfer that object. Just like I said, you cannot use it outside that module. And just the same way you cannot transfer the objects to another user. So now let me open my terminal back. Now, let me come up here. I think when we created this object, we transferred it to, okay, this is a shared object. I think it should be this one. So, oh nope, let me see this one. Yeah, so this is the owner of the our object, which is our account. So if I come up here, let me copy the object ID. And who owns it? 09xb, which is our account. So I think I have this account logged in here, my slush wallet. So 098, yeah, that's it. So if I come to NFTs now, let me check what is our object ID. Is 0x23e. So let me come here and look for an object of 0x23A. Oh, am I getting it wrong? Yeah, 0x23A. Yeah, this is it. Now if you look at it now, if you look at this object, you're seeing that sending is not permitted. Why? Because anytime we want to interact with this object, right now it is now a soul bound object. Like it's now a soul bound object. It's only owned by this address and we cannot send it out. So this object cannot interact with any other smart contacts except from this module. So because it has only a key ability, it does not have the store ability, so it cannot interact with any other object. You know that this send button here on its Slush wallet, if you look on this send button, it's actually on your last smart contact to send an asset. So that's why as it is here, it's just stick to this wallet here because the only way you can change any value or like transfer it to another user or interact with it, it's when you use it in this same module it was created. So now right now, let me give this our object is stability and let's see another difference now. Let me just let me just comment out all this function here and let me use that of the one created in the alarm module. Now I'll be using this other functions here. And now let's see the difference. What I want to show you that right now you're seeing that since we use only the key ability, before we use only key ability, we know the star ability, you're not able to transfer the object. That means you're not able to interact with it and last smart contacts. Sending not permitted. So now let me show you that if I add store ability now, it can be able to interact with other modules and from it can also interact with like other smart contacts if it's imported here. So let me come back to Sui Move runner. Let me deploy the package again. See, I got an error. Let me build first. Let me build the package and see where my error is coming from. So invalid. Oh, okay, I see. There's an error here. I can actually change this value. If I want to change this value, I'll need to put the function here. So let me get rid of that function right now because I'm not going to be changing the value for now. So let me not make the smart contacts complex. Let me build again. Let me get rid of the warning. Okay, so now let me try to publish. So now we've successfully published our smart contacts. So we actually published two modules here. Now let me call our first function, which is going to be the other module. Now let me call transfer to user. So first of all, let me transfer to ourselves. Let me come here and copy our wallet address and let me paste it here and let me execute it. Now we've created a new object. What's the object ID? 0x5e. So let's go back to our slush wallet. Let me come here. 0x5e. Yeah, I think this is it. Now if you look at it now, this is it. If I click on it now, if I click on view on Explorer, yeah, that's the type of my objects. Now if I come back here, I think it should be this one. Now if you look at it now, the send button is not showing here. It shows here now. Whereas in the other one, where we did not add the key ability, the send button refused to show. Just as I explained before. Because this one now it has the store ability, sorry. It was a mistake. Right now we're able to send this because we give our object the store ability. So right now this object is able to interact with other smart contacts that are not from like other smart contacts. Well, whereas this one over here, to use it, or like even to send it or interact with it, it must be from that same module. Even in that same package, it must be from all the functions to interact with this object must be from that same module. I hope you're not confused. If you're confused, try to go back and look at the codes, watch the video again, try to play with transfer, public transfer, store, and key and store. Just try to play with it. I just wanted to explain um this transfer function. So I hope you understood. Okay. So thank you very much. Um See you next video. If you have any question, feel free to DM me or keep them on the comment section. I'll wait there to answer you. See you next video.